Welcome back for our last session, I guess, of the whole KansasFest before we get to the vendor fair. So we have Kevin Savetz talking to us about some renderer thing.
Make the Atari guy go last. I see how it is.
You're not really an Atari guy. Was that flat?
Atari forever. Hi, I am Kevin Savetz, and I'm here to talk to you about the good word of Atari. Have you heard the good news? Rob, could you please lock the door? Thank you. I'm here to talk to you about Renderific, which is an SVG renderer for the Atari computers. I had plans to try to make it port to the Apple II in time before today, and I didn't have time for that. But you could do it. I empower you to do it. So, an SVG renderer, what does that mean? SVG stands for Scalable Vector Graphics. And basically, it's an XML file format. It's a text file that just for drawing graphics. But unlike a JPEG or a GIF or something like that, that tells the computer what to show, the SVG tells the computer how to draw it. So it might say, draw a line that is X pixels long, and then draw a vertical line that is twice that number of pixels long, and then draw a curve. And so the advantage to an SVG file is, rather than if you've ever had a JPEG or something and it was small and you tried to blow it up, it gets all pixely and doesn't look good at larger sizes. An SVG file, once it's done, you can render it like as size of a postage stamp, or you could make a billboard out of it with no loss of resolution. That's why people like SVG files. So in order to display an SVG file on your computer or whatever, you have an SVG renderer, and on the Mac it just might be Preview, can show SVG files, and there's Inkscape, and there's many programs for dealing with SVGs. But traditionally they're not used on older 8-bit computers because I don't think it existed when people were using 8-bit computers. This is what a SVG file looks like. In its kind of native format. It's just a text file with numbers and codes that say, start drawing at a certain place and then draw a curve going from somewhere to somewhere else, and then continue the curve. So it's hard to parse, hard to understand, but this might end up looking like this. This is a SVG file that is rendered out. Now, using my Renderific SVG renderer for the Atari computers, it ends up looking like this. Here they are side by side. Now, keep in mind, I wrote down the size. On my Mac, this rendered instantly. Open the file, boom, it's there a fraction of a second. On the Atari, in BASIC, this took 42 minutes to draw. Now, I used a language called Turbo Basic XL, which is an enhanced BASIC for the Atari, offers some better looping and functions and some other routines that I really needed that the built-in Atari BASIC wouldn't use. Similarly, if this was to be ported to the Apple II, AppleSoft BASIC, I believe, could not do this at all. I started doing the port for the Apple, and I was decided to use Blankenship Basic, which is an enhanced BASIC that's available that offers, basically it came down to the better looping functions so that you're not stuck using go-tos all the time. It's more of a structured programming environment. I'm going to show you some samples of output. So SVG, basically I decided to use SVG Tiny, which is kind of a subset of SVG. The real full SVG spec can do moving graphics and animation and stuff, and I just took the real simple format and kind of worked with that. Here's kind of a flowery thing that took, 11 minutes to render. here's some other things that I had rendered out while testing the program. This one is particularly interesting. I was just looking around the internet for SVG files, and I'll show you where I found some later. But I had found that a gentleman some years ago went to the Penguin software games, including this from Transylvania, and figured out the encoding format that they used for some of their graphics and exported it to SVG. So, and then I found those and then re-imported it into my Atari. So this is from, I believe, the game Transylvania. And that's a scene that you might have seen on your Apple, but running in full color and rendered from a different file format. And this is a fake electronics component. And here's a logo for my podcast. So this started off as a simple, this is one of those projects that was just like, I'm going to try this for a couple hours, something to do, watching TV. You know, I've got a stupid idea. I wonder if I can draw squares on the screen from an SVG file. And this turned into something that encompassed 3 weeks of my life, just like full-time thinking about this. No work, no paying attention to the children, not eating. I'm just like had SVG on the mind for quite a while. So. And I logged the full thing on Twitter, and which made it real convenient to do this presentation, because I had screenshots all the way down from the beginning. So it started off with the kind of what I thought was the simplest thing, was just to draw some boxes. And you can see I'd say it was today's stupid project. And I drew some rectangles, and that was fun. And then it's like, well, heck, I can draw rectangles. Maybe I can draw ellipses, and that works. And then I can draw lines, and then I started seeing what else I could do. And so suddenly, I could draw a graph, and I could draw a maze, and I saw real progress real fast. And then it's like, oh, here's an archive of every country's flag in SVG. That's neat. Let's try that. And then here's my first attempt at the American flag. So it's supposed to look like, and this is what it came out as. I called this one America. But eventually, this is as good as I got it. It took 223 seconds to render. Now you notice, this is not a perfect rendition of the American flag. And there's some things that I ended up not doing. This flag, the way it was drawn, required fills. Basically, you put in the blue field, and then the white and the red stripes or whatever. And I did this. This is just 1-bit color, and I ignored all fills. So you can kind of see behind the scenes of this file that the way they did it is the stripes continue into the blue field, but they're hidden, so you don't know they're there. And then there's all the stars, and so that's about as good as that one got. And then I got into Bezier Curves. I think that's how you pronounce it. It's a word I've read 100 times but have never said until today. Bezier Curves. Now this is something that Mr. Trahan, my algebra teacher in middle school, would not believe I would ever be able to do. I got a D- in high school algebra. It's as far as I made it. I was terrible at math. I hated it. It made me cry. And he gave me a D- just so he wouldn't have to see me again. Math wasn't fun. And I just didn't get it. Well, here I am many years later, and okay, I know more stuff and I have more life experience, but now I'm figuring out how to deal with Bezier curves, which I promise you I'd never seen before. And it was fun, and I did it, and Mr. Trahan, probably wouldn't believe any of this was happening, and neither do I. So I can draw a curve on the screen. I learned how to do that in BASIC with the help of some friends who are way better at math than I am. And then I went, well, why don't we just put this on the screen? I can put it on paper. Plotters are fun. And there was a plotter available for the Atari, and so I figured out how to put it down on paper. So that was neat. let's see. Here is an SVG file. This is a maze. This is a triangular maze that I downloaded from a website that generates mazes. So you can see, I don't know how much into it we need to get, but basically you need to draw lines, and then there's polylines, which is basically a line that connects to another line. And that's how they did the maze. And I think if you were here a couple minutes before the talk, you can see what that kind of maze looks like. So the problem, my biggest issue in doing this wasn't the math or the graphics, really. It was parsing. It was the parsing of the text file. That was surprising to me the most complicated bit. Just Atari Basic Excel isn't super strong in dealing with strings. So I've got this, huge long string that might be, a couple of K of this sort of garbage, and then I had to look for the end of the line, and then let's figure out, okay, it says it's supposed to be a line, so I've got to find that command, and I need X1 and I need Y1, and then I need to take this number, and then I need to convert it to a float, and so just parsing out all these little bits. And some of the other commands, like the Bezier curves, are pretty complicated, and some of them can just go on for forever with, like, here's a line to another line to another line to another line. And so that was surprisingly the hard thing. 4 a.m. named the program. Or rather, he suggested the name for the program. And also suggested a license, which I used, and it's free for you to convert to the Apple II. It was written up on Hackaday. That was neat. And it's up on GitHub, where you can download it. Now I started converting it to Apple, and I think I've got some screenshots of that in a second. Here, I started putting it, like I said, into Blankenship Basic. Frankly, I'm done. I've done this. It was fun. I started converting it for KansasFest. It didn't get done. So I leave it to you. If you think this is interesting, run with it. I can give you what I've done so far. So SVGs are fun. I mean, there's all these generators and things out there. You can make mazes, and you can make flowers, and the weird polygon things, and the flags I told you about. And there's all these things out there that you can render and draw and play with. But this whole thing led me into the rabbit hole of #plotter Twitter, which is my favorite thing. Absolute favorite thing. Now, I mentioned my Atari plotter before, and it's a tiny plotter. But plotters are devices that have been used in business, going back to the 60s, I think. And some of them are huge, giant color things, and basically like printers. But instead of printing, like how a printer works, they have pens, and they have pens of different colors. And the plotter might literally go over there, grab a red pen, and draw it on a big piece of paper, just like a baby would with a crayon, and then go back and get a green pen and do it again. And then you can make beautiful art. And these are just some things I grabbed off of Twitter today. Now, there was a plotter, at least one plotter, made by Apple for the Apple II, and I want to see way more plotters at KansasFest next year. And these things are usually plotted from SVG files. Not always. Paul Rickards is one of my favorite plotter artists. So, this is a little bit of the code in my program. Endif, put that on my gravestone, because we're all dying. Some of us are just dying faster than others. So, let's see, anything else I need to tell you? No, that's basically it. I had fun with this project, and you can too, if you are so inclined. I want to give you just a sample of how slow it is. I think probably over time by now, but here, we'll take that Cook Islands flag that I showed you before. Actually, we'll do the Antic logo, because that's fun. When you run the program, you give it the file name, and then a scale factor basically can scale things down. Because a lot of these files, believe it or not, are intended for a larger canvas than 320 by 192. So you can choose to scale them down. And then do you want to go to the plotter, the screen, or both? And do you want the debug window? We'll keep it off for now. And you can watch. First, it takes a second to load the file in. It's got to read the text file in. We're gonna skip past that a little bit because reading in this file is painfully slow. And then, okay, now you can see, I mean, every little line is just killing this machine. It's just like, oh. But it's all parsing. That's the slow part. It's just figuring out what this SVG file needs. Now, I'll turn off the speed limiter and turn it to the world's fastest Atari. And it's still pretty slow.
Megahertz?
I don't know. Lots of megahertz. So there you are.
How does it decide on the order in which it draws the characters?
It does exactly what is in the file. It just parses the file from beginning to end. So it really depends on how it was put into the file.
This file, right?
Someone created it for me.
Oh, you did?
I did not create this file.
Okay.
Yeah. Any other questions? Ken?
You said one of your samples took like 230 seconds to render.
Yes.
Were you doing that in real time, or was it sped up like this? Because I'm wondering, what did you do for those 3 minutes?
When I was testing, I would turn off the speed limiter, let it run fast, but then the second count was still accurate because the clock was going faster. So yeah, I made a lot of cups of tea and took the dogs for walks and things for some of these, for sure. This question from Charles?
In your looking around at SVG and AVIC computers, has anyone done an SVG to logo conversion?
Has anyone done an SVG to logo conversion? No, but it's going to be you. It's a great idea. I'm not aware of that, no. Any more questions? Ken again.
You showed us an SVG file and showed us a lot of coordinates and instructions. My understanding is that SVG files can also contain JavaScript.
SVG files can also contain JavaScript, yes. That is, I'm holding that for version 2.0.
But what happens if you throw such a file at your...
Oh, so my renderer will, anything it doesn't understand, it tries to skip. For instance, the fill function. If it sees a fill, it just glosses over it. And if it's something really weird, it'll probably just crash the program. If it saw JavaScript, it would probably just choke. There's a couple of curves I couldn't figure out. It does most of the Bezier curves just fine, and there's a couple of weird ones that I could not figure out how to render properly, nor could I find anyone to tell me why I was doing it wrong. But I am amazed at myself for getting as far as I did with those curves. Anything else? Yes?
Well, you said disparagingly that you couldn't write it in Atari soft. In AppleSoft.
Right.
Could this be written in Atari soft, or did it require Basic Excel?
I wanted Basic Excel because of I didn't want to have to deal with go-tos, and Basic Excel has whiles and better procedural language. That's not the word. You know what I mean. I could just, more modular and no go-tos. So. All right. Thank you.